We're back. I'm back. I don't know if anybody else is back. I don't know if anybody else is in the mood to be back. I have no idea, but if you get a notification, I'm just gonna, sit here and do a little bit of my spiel, my thing. What a nightmare. Anyway, if anybody was going to watch this on replay, I don't know. Like I said, I'm not sure if I'm going to continue, see if anybody shows up. Probably people have given up on me, which I fully understand. But let's see how this goes. I have a completely blank slate. I was in touch with somebody that was a tech, and he said that they were having issues with certain settings in their server, and he said to me to remove my emojis out of my ticket, so it's not as colorful anymore, but it's just as welcoming. I don't know if anybody is going to come back. Oh dear, this is embarrassing. Anyway, let me see. Yeah, I'm so lost. So confused. We'll see if anybody pops in. Let me make sure that before that happens, if I can just start sort of, in the background, adding a few things, see what happens. And if we do this all the way through, then I am going to definitely put timestamps into the description. So far, obviously, people have gone on about their business. I'm just going to put in the chat that I'm here. I am back. I'm back. Hello, anybody? Oh my gosh. Oh, this is awful. This is so terrible. And then what I'm going to do is, while I wait, I'm going to bring up a local video that I had prepared for the earlier stream, see if that is going to allow me to do anything. I have my beautiful Cattleya durigan that I wanted to display and show. First of all, we're going to put that on mute. Everything that was actually ready before and now isn't. And yeah. So we're going to put her on loop. We're going to put her into full screen. Andy Land. Oh, Andy Land, I cannot tell you. I am sitting here bright red. Of course, now the welcoming committee has gotten, my daughter's coming home. The welcoming committee is going bananas. Yes, I'm back. And technician number 3 jumped on board and we did a little bit of a spiel. And they had some issues with the servers and some of the settings were off. They're troubleshooting, and it turns out that they're still working on allowing emojis in the ticker at the bottom, the welcome message, the one that says, be the voice. Oh, it's just awful. So I removed those, and apparently they're fixing that issue, and hopefully by next week everything's going to be normal. Anyway, Andy Land, do you want me to continue? Because if you say no, Nina, that's fine. Then that's fine with me. If you want me to continue, I will definitely continue. You are also very, very welcome to come up and we can just talk, you and I, without a camera and have a little bit of a chit chat. I leave that entirely up to you. Oh, I am so hot under the collar at the moment. Undescribable. Okay. Let's see. We're just going to, I don't know, get into chat and see what's going on. Okay, Andy, do you want to come up? Do you want to come up and be my wingman? Oh. Awful. Okay. Right. What I had planned for today was to go through what we did the other night with regards to the organic media get an idea of what we're talking about and do it with inorganic media as part of the process of me preparing my digital files. And first of all, I want to start with something, basically, just a little bit of an intro. That is Cattleya durigan, by the way. That bloomed beautifully in the summer of 2022. So what I'm going to do is, before I get into the different media that I have as the most popular inorganic media used for growing orchids, I would like to define the difference between descriptions of inert and pH neutral. Sorry about that. Sorry, guys. So, just 1 minute. I'm sorry. So anyway, let's get back into this. I know, Julie-san, I know. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much. I don't know if notifications are going out. I just got back on after a technician managed to troubleshoot a problem that apparently had to do with some emojis. They're working on it. The servers have gone a little bit whack at their end, so but we're here. So I'm just going to proceed, get into the groove. So anyway, what I wanted to do before we get into the different media of the most popular inorganic media for growing orchids was to differentiate the descriptions of inert and pH neutral, because sometimes the two of them can be conflicting. They're not the same, but they do have a form of influence upon each other. So if something is deemed inert, that means it is chemically inactive. Synonyms for inert are idle, inactive, passive, or supine. I could be considered inert at the moment because I'm definitely on idle, which results in inactivity, making me passive. So full transparency. But yeah, inert basically means chemically inactive. Anywho, inert is sometimes misinterpreted or considered to be pH neutral, and while that can often be the case, it does not necessarily apply across the board. An inert object can be pH neutral, but it may not stay pH neutral if it comes in contact with something that has a different pH to the inert material itself. So, let me qualify that. Something that is pH neutral has a pH of 7, but if an inert material is porous and the pH that it is exposed to is not pH neutral, the inert material may take on the pH that it is exposed to. Media that does not retain water but is inert will maintain a pH neutral value within the pot. However, media that does retain water, absorbs it, and has a wicking characteristic can absorb the pH of the water that is going to be exposed to over a period of time. For that reason, it is important to know the starting pH of your porous inorganic media so that when it comes to adding fertilizer or supplement solution, you can pH according to what is necessary to buffer against the out of range pH the media itself may display. I am hoping that that all makes sense. In case not, I'm going to give you a little example based on my circumstances. For example, here, the pH of my RO water is 8. My leca is stored in that water. So my leca has a pH of 8. While leca is inert, the fact that it is porous, it will take on the pH of the water it is stored in. And I have to be mindful of that when I pH my nutrient solution. For the roots to absorb what I would like them to, my pH solution may be a little bit lower than the norm, but seeing as my leca has a pH of 8, the media will balance out any lower pH I add to the pot and bring it to a range that then allows for the nutrients to be absorbed. If my leca were stored with a pH of 7, and 7 being neutral, the leca being inert, but porous, it will absorb the water at pH of 7, and presto, my solutions need to be a different pH for the orchid to take up the nutrients, and I hope that is not confusing. As we go through this, follow me in the chat, or not follow me, but tag me in the chat. Just use my channel name. It lights up my name in orange. I can see your text much, much more clearer. And with that being out of the way, because I always hear that, oh, my media is inert, I'm still very, very careful about saying if something is porous, it may not stay inert. Inert does not mean pH neutral. Okay, so we're going to go on with our first inorganic media. And let me get that pulled up and say goodbye to our beautiful durigan for now. And we're going to start with our perlite, which is a very common ingredient in orchid mixes, and for good reason, also known as sponge rock. It decreases compaction of the media mix, especially in organic media. It increases aeration and retains moisture. Sponge rock or perlite is a volcanic glass that expands when heated and becomes very porous. When you come across the term sponge rock, that usually refers to the large chunks of the same substrate, whereas perlite is more commonly used when we think of the small styrofoam-sized substrate. So in my little classic card example there with the pros and cons, my perlite is the small stuff that we get a lot of. Sponge rock in a larger format is now not so readily available, at least not here in Europe. And I'm thinking, I'm not entirely sure, but in the United States as well, they're cutting back on its production. I don't know why. Maybe it has to do with something that has to do with its toxicity when we look at the dangers of it. Sorry guys. All right, so these cards aren't 100% complete because I'm still figuring out further details, but for the purposes of the stream, it is very, very useful. But when I talk about the dangers of perlite or sponge rock, it's the glassy, it's the dust that really is a problem, and that should never be inhaled. It is super important to be mindful of that, and it is hazardous. So if you look at perlite under a microscope, it looks like a collection of small glass bubbles. And in fact, that is exactly what it is. That means that although picking up perlite with your hands, you won't get cut, but it is abrasive and can cause real damage to soft, sensitive tissue like your throat and lungs. So that being said, don't use perlite in any repotting without wearing a mask when handling dry perlite to avoid breathing in the dust, even the minute particles that we don't see. Seeing as rinsing out the dust of a batch of perlite for repotting is advisable anyway, because we don't want to clog up our pots with it. Once perlite is wet, there is little to no risk of inhaling anything. But perlite is very, very often used in organic media with potting up and mixing into the mix, especially when it comes to, for example, you want to make sure that your sphagnum moss doesn't compact too quickly, stays nicely aerated if you are going to pack it in tight into the pot. So it is also, it keeps the fibers from compacting throughout a period of time. Doesn't mean it extends the lifespan of a sphagnum moss, but it sure helps with the aeration, and it makes sure that it doesn't just drop immediately or, let's say, suffocate the roots too soon. Now, perlite is inert, and as I mentioned in the intro, I would have to say that inert, in this case, perlite will stay inert because usually we don't store perlite in water. We take it out of the bag, one rinse with a little bit of a strainer, rinse out the amount that you need to get rid of the dust, and you're good to go. So it will stay inert, and then of course it becomes what it is in the pot, and then it won't change anything with regards to the pH in your pot when you add any kind of solution. It increases the humidity in a pot exponentially, so it is something to be aware of if you are growing in a very humid environment. If you don't need more humidity in your pot than your ambient environment already has, don't worry, don't use perlite in extremely dry climates. It is definitely an advantage, and I'm actually testing perlite only in a pot with a Brassavola orchid because of my extremely dry climate. So far, so good. Now, perlite is not recyclable. Sponge rock, you can say is, but again, sponge rock, I'm not really including that because it is being, how do you say, not produced anymore. So I wouldn't want to add that something to these cards that is not going to be around much longer in the future. So it's not recyclable. I mean, you can, but it'll take on properties if exposed to light. You know, the algae will get in. It's vulnerable to solids loading. You know, not only just the algae, but if you have an orchid in perlite, or let's say a lot of perlite in your mix with your orchid, then if the orchid is vigorous, it will be filled with the roots as well. Because especially, for example, oncidium roots that are very fine and hairy, they will grow through the perlite. The air pores in the perlite can capture solids, other kinds of debris, biofilm, and similar result, which causes sort of a blocked percolation. Now, this isn't typically a big issue unless the setup is quite dirty or is being run on organic hydroponics. Okay, if you're using organic, let's say organic fertilizers, there is so much more stuff, things, floaty bits in organic fertilizers. And with perlite, it would start to clog it up very, very quickly. Now, anything, I mean, its lifespan is indefinite. If you want to leave your orchid in a pot indefinitely, the algae will grow around the edge of the pot. I mean, we can cover pots up and all that business, but perlite has a bit of a downside in the fact that, you know, it will load up the solids very quickly. But the positive side is that you can actually flush it out. Just be careful that it will never ever stay steady in the pot. It will actually always float. Be careful with your flushing. And sometimes as well, if you have perlite mixed out throughout the pot, it can float to the top of your media in the pot, or it can sink to the bottom. Eventually, if it's very loose media and you're using perlite, for example, in bark, then it'll float around all over the place. It's not going to stay where it is supposed to. A good thing about it, it is sterile. You don't have to prepare perlite in any way, shape, or form when you take it out of the bag, as opposed to other media that we are going to be discussing further on. And that's why I put down in the cons, use and bin. I would advise to do that because, yeah, I don't know, I've never boiled perlite. The stuff is so inexpensive, which is that's the pro. It is very inexpensive. I would just, you know, use it and bin it. Now, if you were to use it solely in a pot with an orchid, know that your orchid is not going to be stable. So it is abrasive. That means root tips, if the orchid is wobbling around, they will stop growing. It's always advisable to mix it. You can also mix perlite with inorganic medium, even though I'm referencing organic a lot, but you can use perlite in inorganic media if need be, especially, for example, if you're going to be using a wet-dry cycle, preferably just with river rocks. But if you're in a very dry climate and you want to add a little bit more humidity, make it more forgiving, especially during the hotter months of the year, then you can sprinkle perlite in between the layers of river rock as you pot your orchid up. And because river rock is so heavy, the perlite will pretty much stay where it is. Some of it will get crushed, but not all of it. So you can always be a little bit more generous with your perlite when you're using river rock. And when I say rock, I'm talking pebbles, okay? I'm not talking the rock size, what you can paint faces on and make all pretty. I'm talking about, you know, the pebbles. So those normally that we use for the surface as top dressing or trying to block out the dry top layer. So you can add perlite into an inorganic media pot as well. It is wicking, so these things, I mean, I have never added perlite into my leca because that's what's the point of that. I've got what I need with my leca. I don't need to clog up the sphere packing of my leca with the small pieces of perlite. But again, as a humidity buffer, humidity increase, it is definitely a good point if you prefer a wet-dry cycle in inorganic media and you're using river rock. So far I don't see any questions, and I'm going to then move on to my next card. We'll go down to and find charcoal. Now understand that I personally have not had any experience with charcoal, not because I don't like it. Everything I see about it, I wish I was not so fussy with my hands and not so fussy about staining, because otherwise charcoal would be in my repertoire, because it certainly has everything. I was having a little bit of difficulty trying to find cons for charcoal. I wonder if I cannot make myself a little bit more smaller and the card bigger. There we go. Nope, we can't do that because I'm going to cover up the low bottom line. Okay, so charcoal has wonderful qualities. The only thing I was thinking that I could find, because not everything is perfect, is the absorption and retention of salts, and it doesn't release the salts even with frequent flushing. Once it's absorbed, you would have to flush the dickens out of the pot or soak the pot over a long period of time. But the minute you fertilize the pot again, boom, it's absorbing the excess salts again. Ideally, of course, I mean, that's a great thing because then it's not a detriment to the roots, but ideally, of course, you want to be able to dial your fertilizer concentration into such a degree that no excess salts are necessarily being absorbed by charcoal. But having said that, if you are, for example, in inorganic media, you can grow your orchids in charcoal 100%. You don't need to add anything. If you are in organic media, it keeps the media fresher for longer, and the time frame for charcoal to keep media fresher for longer, if you say sphagnum moss is going to degrade very, very quickly, which we say, you know, it's got to be consistently moist, with the exception of if you're using the PET method or if you're doing the classic Neo setup. It has to be consistently moist to be effective for the fine-rooted orchids that are usually potted in it, or let's say even summer-blooming phalaenopsis. If you add some charcoal in it, you can extend the lifespan of that media that supposedly goes acidic as from the moment you start keeping it wet. Lifespan, I say 8 months just to be on the safe side. You can get away with 12 months. But with charcoal, you can actually double the lifespan. So instead of being very, very, let's say, too positive about things, or stay on the safe side, and we can talk about charcoal. Instead of repotting your orchid every year, you can repot your orchid every 18 months just to be on the safe side, because I don't want to put something out there and then people have burnt roots. So my sphagnum moss changes personally were always every 6 months. I did that as a routine because of my low humidity. I had to keep my sphagnum moss always super, super wet, causing it to grow algae and root tips. You know, the acidity of the algae, it would just burn the root tips. So every 6 months I switched out my sphagnum moss. But if I had charcoal, or for example mounted my orchid on charcoal and added a bit of sphagnum moss, then I would have gotten away with it for at least 18 months, supposedly. That's theoretically, I just put that out there based on what I've read, but have not been able to prove that for myself. I will not be using charcoal in the future either. I just have a certain thing about dirt and staining, which is one of the downsides of having charcoal, because it does stain the roots. The velamen goes black, and yeah, I don't know. The velamen will go black for many other reasons, but I don't know. I just put that in as a downside because everybody likes a beautiful, clean velamen, and then we see some mistakes that we make. Anyway, It does retain the salts. It doesn't release the salts very easily. It will float. It will never be a sinking media. A lot of watering is required when using charcoal, especially if you're doing the organic mix as well, because it doesn't retain any water at all. You don't have a humidity buffer with charcoal either, but it is forgiving on the roots when it comes to repotting and long lasting. It doesn't have a lifespan. I say that you can recycle it. That is a personal decision. That is not something I would ever recommend. But the fact that you can do it, you can reuse your charcoal, is amazing. However, let's just be very, very clear when I say charcoal, okay? Charcoal is the product of burning, dehydrating, and evaporating the volatile substances from formerly living matter. Since activated carbon is made by processing charcoal, it would be considered an organic product. But this is a gray area. And hey, Robbie, I'm so glad to see you. It's been a nightmare, but we're here. We're here. But you can see that I've put on my card the in and then organic. So it's a gray area. I consider it inorganic, but there's also those out there that say it is organic because it actually is a derivative of organic matter, which is wood. So, activated charcoal. Just take this in. Activated charcoal is highly absorbent as opposed to standard charcoal and is termed horticultural charcoal. Okay? Activated carbon and activated charcoal are the same, and the terms can be used interchangeably, but coal is not charcoal and cannot be used in its place. Coal is a natural mineral that forms over the span of millions of years, while charcoal is a manufactured product created from wood. The motivation for using charcoal in agriculture for soil correction follows the discovery of the Amazon of Terra Preta, or dark earth, which means black soil translated, the most fertile soil known to man. These black soils contain charcoal many times over than those of the surrounding areas, and that is a fact that explains the high quality of vegetation and soil and the soil fertility in the area. Good quality hardwood charcoal is rare, and many nurseries have none for sale. Bad quality charcoal made from soft pine wood, timber offcuts, or remains from a fireplace are not a good alternative and should not be used. Right? Don't take what came out of your barbecue and think, oh goody, I'm going to recycle this. That's not what this is about. So here's the thing. Let me go back to my notes because I did have to write this down. There is one part here that says that there's a difference between hardwood charcoal and how it absorbs salt as opposed to the softer wood charcoal. Okay, hardwood charcoal absorbs less salts than activated charcoal. Okay, so let's go back to the top of my notes where I've said, again, because I don't have experience with this material, I wrote this all down just so that I stay on track. And anybody in the comments, on replay, in the chat, please correct me straight away while we're at it, okay? So we don't want charcoal from soft pine wood or timber offcuts that remains from a fireplace. And activated charcoal is going to be softer and will absorb more from the roots, from the toxins, from the media, from the salts. Hardwood does it less readily. Okay, it will absorb some of the toxins from the breakdown of the organic material in the potting mix, but not as readily as activated charcoal. Now, another thought about charcoal is I've added into the inorganic category for this segment of most popular orchid media, but it could also be considered organic. I'm reading from my notes because I don't want to miss anything here. Okay. If you consider using charcoal that is purposed for barbecues, which is possible, then make sure that it is not treated with some form of accelerant, which helps to start the slow burn for your barbecue. And that includes charcoal briquettes. All right, just because it looks pretty and is more easily to maybe break up, we don't want anything for a barbecue that is any way, shape, or form treated. Plain, clean charcoal in its raw form is paramount, whereas charcoal and clean don't really go hand in hand, in my opinion. Speaking of just, very, very dirty. So I hope that made sense. I don't normally like to talk about something that I don't have personal experience in, but I thought that because charcoal is around and it has so many benefits, I prefer to put it in there and learn again through the comments and everybody's experiences, whoever were to watch the replay, and then add that into as information to the live stream and then eventually into my digital media. Andy Land, do you think while charcoal absorbs toxins, it might also absorb before you? No. The orchids will absorb super quickly. They have first dibs. By the time the charcoal is absorbing something, the orchids have had their fill and the roots will have absorbed what they've needed. And if there's just excess, if there's too much, and excess doesn't mean a higher concentration of your parts per million. It could mean that something is evaporating way too quickly before, the fertilizer was able to do its thing. So in my dry climate, if I put charcoal in my pot, I better make sure that it's at the bottom layer of the pot and not anywhere near the surface. Okay? So no, your orchids will go straight away for whatever you put in your pot. And everything else that's left over, the charcoal gets. All right? So Robbie is confirming that, especially the hardwood. Thank you, Robbie. I appreciate that input. Okay, so again, I do apologize if this sounded a little bit haphazard. Full transparency. There's one thing I do want to really be, honing in on when we talk about inorganic media and flushing, that charcoal doesn't release the salts. Once it's in there, it is in there. And if you soak your pot trying to get the salts out, you might get a little bit of a reaction from the first little layer of charcoal, but not if it has penetrated, and definitely not if the charcoal is there to serve its purpose to keep the media nice and sweet. Then that's a long time frame for the salts to absorb and penetrate into it. So just keep that in mind. And now we're going to move on to my next card, which is also a little bit, it's a favorite of mine. And that is pumice. And it's a favorite of mine because I used to use it, collect it on the beach of Kenya, because it used to come floating in on the ocean and land on the beach in big chunks, like, fist size. And then we'd collect it and we'd take it home, and then we'd use it to exfoliate, be it our feet or whatever, our hands, anything. Even if we stepped on tar, it was fantastic. All that good stuff with pumice. Now, personally, I've only just started using pumice as part of my media, but it is not something I'm going to be adopting permanently. But it has worked really, really well with oncidiums. I know, it was fantastic. I had so much pumice at home, I tell you, but not for my orchids in Kenya, because what's coming in from the ocean is super high in salt. Yeah, we had pumice everywhere. The bathroom, we had little, like, you make your cue balls for billiards or snooker. You put them up on a pyramid-like thing, but it's flat. Well, in our case, our pumice was stacked like a pyramid, even as a decorative thing. It was awesome. But yeah, so I've only recently started using pumice, maybe a year in now. But I have to say that, it's working really well, especially for the oncidiums that are potted up in it. And I have absolutely no complaints. It does accumulate a lot of algae on the surface before even my moss has a chance to grow. So normally I get a moss layer if I'm using lava rock or leca. Pumice seems to enjoy growing algae. I'm hoping to get some moss eventually. But algae will grow wherever there's light and wherever there is fertilizer. So there you go. Anyway, so this is a light colored, most of the time, extremely porous igneous rock that forms during explosive volcanic eruptions. And it is usually created by underwater volcanic eruptions with frothy magma when that cools and depressurizes very quickly. It is a great substitute for seramis, which I will get into further into this presentation. So if the characteristics of seramis sound appealing to you, let's say through my videos I use seramis, and your climate, and also would be conducive to your climate, but you cannot find it in your area, then consider pumice as an alternative. It's also much cheaper than seramis. So pumice also comes in different sizes, or as in when you shop for it, different grades is what they call it. And it can be used as a filler media to increase wicking or water retention. If you're using also, once again, a non-wicking media like river rock, let me qualify that as in the little pebbles, and you want to go for a wet-dry cycle setup using inorganic media. But you also want to have the benefits of some water retention in the pot, especially for the warmer months of the year. So here we have the larger version, the bigger version option than the perlite we saw earlier. And the pumice grades do come in different sizes. And I have a fabulous image that I'm hoping to find relatively quickly, seeing as this live stream was not structured the way I had it before we crashed again earlier. So let me see where I put Robbie's image, because if I can't find that quickly, I've got it. I'm going to go and find the email, but I've got it. Let me show you Robbie's image, seeing as that was generously sent to show you. Seriously? Why am I showing two different screens now? You're seeing my full screen. Hello. Like I said, low budget production tonight, desafortunadamente. So let's go there. But we're live. We're live. I couldn't say that 45 minutes ago. Okay. Yes, pumice on the beach. You go, oh my goodness. Oh, okay. Oh, what a shame. Sorry to hear that. That's the worst. It really, really is. Considering oh yeah, but you're on the West Coast. Yeah. Well, I guess the currents sent everything to the East Coast of Kenya. There, Robbie's wonderful presentation, delicious plate of pumice, also in a variety of colors, because not all pumice has the same color. But make sure that I know, Michelle, it's good to see you. It took 35 minutes of more troubleshooting with a technician. And yeah, seems like technician number 3 is a charm. Their servers are starting to settle down after whatever happened with their servers. And what I needed to do this time around was remove all the emojis from my ticker, so it's not as colorful. Apparently, once the servers get regrouped, I can put my emojis back in, but for now, this is what we've got. So I do apologize for all of this. Yes, it's not very... I told him my reputation is in the tank. I'm so glad you're back. Thank you so much. Anyway, so yes, this is a wonderful presentation of pumice where you can see the different sizes and also the different colors. So again, if you want a wet-dry cycle, because inorganic media does not necessarily mean semi-hydroponics, wet-dry cycle, you can use something that is not porous and pot your orchid up in that. But if you want to have the benefit of some wicking, if you want to be able to walk away from your orchids and not be watering 4 times a day in a hot, dry climate, then you can put pumice in as layering as well. Not only can you leave your orchid then in a saucer of water, everything will wick up through the roots, giving you some breathing space. Are you heading? Thank you, Michelle. Are you heading off to bed, Robbie? Okay. Okay, maybe I'm misreading. But anyway, so there you go. Different sizes. Now, I wanted to make sure that yes, here we go. Pumices from silica-rich lavas are white. Silica is a fantastic component for your orchids. Oh, okay, Roby, I got that wrong. My apologies. So I have it as a supplement for my orchids. I do give silica because I don't have any kind of, they don't get it from anything else. I have to give my orchids everything because leca obviously has absolutely zero nutrients in it. So if you get really white pumice, now there's pumice for decorative purposes that is bleached. So make sure that you have non-bleached. You want natural, untreated pumice, and that white is a representation of how much silica is in it, and it is fantastic for orchids. So and that obviously, as you go down through the different colors, you can see that intermediate silica content are often yellow or brown. And then a little bit rarer, the silica pore is actually black. And you can see that there's a very, very few dark pieces of black pumice in there. So just make sure the white is pretty. The white will collect algae. Pumice will collect algae, but definitely a great media for the orchids, simply just because of the silica richness in it, and they're going to love you for it. Great for lots and lots of strong structures and cell walls. So let me go back to the pros and cons here. We've got lightweight, long lasting, recyclable. Again, I would say that is a personal it's a personal decision. So in the cons, I've also put it's hard to recycle because the roots do love to grab onto all the beautiful little, air pockets that pumice has. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, don't worry about it. We've got that. It's okay, Robbie. I appreciate it. You've been so busy. You've been so supportive. You were busy with me yesterday. No, it's awesome. Hakuna Matata. So we've also got absorption and retention of salts, and it is going to release the salts very, very slowly, if at all. So just be very cautious when you're using pumice, that if you're going to be fertilizing, either you fertilize low or you make flushing part of your regular regime. Horticultural grade pumice, yes, definitely. Of course, that's going to have another little added price tag, but yeah, that would be amazing. Or if you can find it somewhere else and it doesn't say, just make sure that it says it says natural or untreated, and you're going to be safe. It's good because it's got nutrient retention. So for hydroponics, it is awesome. That's what we want. It's got the wicking efficacy. It is inexpensive. Yippee-yay, that is what we need in our economic climate today. Something that is inexpensive. If you want to go through the trouble of recycling it, just make sure you give it a good hard boil. It shouldn't crush. It shouldn't break. It is pretty sturdy despite its lightweight characteristic. So I said cost effective and inexpensive in the pros. I've added the two of them because if you're going to opt for recycling, if you're going to do that, then it is cost effective because you are going to be reusing it. And while it is inexpensive, where there are other medias that are cost effective but expensive. So I haven't doubled up there. There's a reason I put the two of them together. Fantastic drainage. Can't say enough good stuff about pumice. One thing though, if you're going to pot your orchid up in pumice on its own, just take the pro of it being lightweight. It could be a con because if your orchid is top heavy, you really need to secure that orchid into the pot or put some kind of a rock stabilizer at the base of the pot. I don't know, something needs to stabilize the orchid because as roots grow, when we move it around, we take the pot, we water, la-di-da, pumice is going to move, it's abrasive, and some root tips could get affected. Doesn't have to be the case, but until a pot is not fully established, there is a slight risk. Robbie says, I will pay $100 for a 25 liter. Julie pays. Yikes. Okay. Alrighty. Yes, that is a price difference. I did a currency conversion. Julie pays 25 euros for 25 liters. So there you go. Yeah. I honestly have not seen pumice anywhere in my garden centers. And I'm always interested to see what they come up with next. But pumice is not one of them. So we are going to move on to another one. And this one I have a lot more experience in. Thank you, Robbie, so much for that image. That gives a great feedback on the different grades and the different sizes. Just have to find my cards again because everything, like I said, low budget production. Okay, we are going to move on to akadama. Now, akadama, I know it sounds strange for orchids, and I thought so too. I always, associate akadama with bonsai. Akadama came into my life when I refused to ship in any more media from what I couldn't source locally. I don't want to pay the weight of the shipping. I don't want to pay the product either because, back in 2020, things changed. And I just thought, why am I not going to go and try and get creative with what I have locally? If I can make that happen, great. And if not, well, Bob's your uncle, c'est la vie. And yes, top dressing of river rock. Exactly, that works as well, Julie's son. I've got river rock pebbles and stuff. It's coming up. I was trying to go with my cards here from lightweight to heaviest. So if there's any order, we're not alphabetic, we're going by weight. But akadama came into my life as, a substitute for seramis. Now, while seramis is expensive for what it is, akadama is even more expensive, so make that make sense. Well, if I ship in seramis, I did the calculation, I'm paying less for the product, but more for the shipping because I need more of the product. So that turns out to be more expensive because it gets heavier, okay? So I went to my garden center, I found akadama, and the bag was, whoa, yikes. I paid 20 euros for a bag, and I can't tell you the liters right now, but I thought that was very expensive because I was paying 5 euros for seramis back in the day, but I have to buy like 5 bags. So, you see here in the balance, 5 euros, 5 bags is 25 euros plus shipping of the 5 bags of seramis. Yeah, you see where my rationale came in, and I thought 20 euros for a bag of akadama, and I don't need as much of it because it is super wicking. When I say it has nutrient retention, it has a water retention, it doesn't dry out quickly. It's become a top dresser for me on some orchids successfully. It just doesn't dry out. It takes a long time to do so in the summer for me as well. It's just worked out perfectly, with the exception that I had to get accustomed to how my ratio of seramis behaves in the pot. And akadama, even though you can squeeze it when it's wet and it turns like into a clay in your fingers, you think, oh my goodness, this thing is going to mush up my roots super fast and it's just going to suffocate them. No, none of that has happened. I repotted a bletia that was in a pot for 2 years, easily outside all the time and always wet. And it's so forgiving on the roots. The akadama just fell off of the roots. I could use it again because I was doing it with the same orchid again. I reused it. That's why I put recycle. But I kid you not, that akadama, I have mistaken it for small, tiny leca, and I've boiled it. And then I had it on my sorting tray. And I ended up with these, because I go by size, I ended up with the tiny bits. It turns out they were akadama and not leca. Yes, I boiled the stuff, put it through a strainer, rinsed it, washed it, you named it, and it held its shape. You squeeze it with your finger and it just feels like it's going to disintegrate. It's fantastic stuff. I am so happy I have ventured down that road with that little experiment. I mix it with grit, which we'll get to as well, in order to buffer just how highly water retentive it is, depending on what I need to use it for. And the grit breaks it up. The grit obviously being inert, non-absorbent, non-wicking, it just, breaks it up. It's perfect. So I found a balance of getting akadama to work for me the way seramis would work, just by adding like 50-50 balances of grit. But akadama, what is that? Because it is, did I put that in my list? It is inert, yes, because it is naturally occurring. It's a granular clay-like mineral used as soil for bonsai trees and other container-grown plants. I did not know that. I know for the bonsai, but other container-grown plants? Orchids maybe? If anybody else whoever would watch this somewhere down the line in the future is using akadama for orchids, please let me know in the comments. Please, I'd be super interested. I want to compare notes. Anyway, it is surface mined, immediately sifted and bagged. That's it, done. There is no further treatment. It's as natural as it comes. And it is supplied in various grades. Now, the deeper mined grade are somewhat harder and more useful in horticulture than the more softer, shallow mined grades. The deeper mined grades are also much, much more expensive. I cannot tell from what I bought in my garden center whether mine is deeper mined or surface mined, because I don't read the language. And the Spanish translation that had to be on the top was somewhat used and scuffed up. I couldn't read anything, but I touched it through the bag and I thought, well, this is what I got. This is what I got to learn to deal with. So here we are. But definitely, if this is not the deeper mind, if this is the softer surface mind akadama that I have, if you've seen my videos, it is awesome. Absolutely awesome. So let me just make sure I've got my notes, because ad lib is good, but when your mind is flying, I want to make sure I stay on track and not keep talking in circles. Let's continue. So akadama may also act as one component of growing media when combined with other elements such as sand, composted bark, peat, or crushed lava. Interesting. I have not used it with lava rock at the moment, and I do not use akadama with any other kind of organic media. And what I love about this stuff, meanwhile, it has the same characteristic as seramis, is that as you water it, it gets darker. So if you're not sure whether you should water your akadama or not, just look at how the color changes. It goes from a very light, let's say beige, and it just darkens into a mud-like color, and you're good to go. Your pot is good and wet. Don't worry about it. The akadama will tell you when it's time to water. Okay, so while akadama is costly than other alternative media, its ability to retain water and nutrients while still providing porosity and free drainage is exponential, especially in very dry climates. Oh dear, we've got a sad face for Michelle. Everything all right, Michelle? Is my audio going down? Did I miss a comment? Let me know, please. In my climate, 30% humidity, average throughout the year, akadama is awesome. Very high humidity in the air. I always say 60% and above. Thank you, Robbie. Appreciate that. 60% and above. I would not use akadama at all anywhere, even if you're not growing outdoors where it's pouring with rain. If that is your conditions indoors, I would not be using akadama because it will stay wet far too long, and especially around the base of the orchid, it can cause issues. So When people say, oh, but wait, the longevity, because did I put that into my long lasting, I put that in. Oof, kudos, Nina. Anyway, the longevity of akadama is at least 5 years in an orchid pot. I have been using it for 2 years now in semi-hydroponics. It is consistently wet and nothing has changed. It has absolutely not changed its form, turned into mud or anything. So it's holding its structure over time. So here's the thing with akadama. If akadama is exposed to freezing temperatures, which some bonsai trees are, then akadama has a shorter lifespan and would break down in 2 years. Seeing as the majority of us are not growing orchids that need to be in freezing cold temperatures, if you were to use akadama, you can easily leave it in your pot for 5 years. There is no breakdown unless it is exposed to freezing cold temperatures. All right, so be mindful of that. If somebody were to tell you, it's going to break down, don't use it, you'll be repotting anyway. Nope, not in our case. Michelle said, I tried Monto clay because it was cheaper and advertised as similar to hard akadama on my maxillaria colorata. Kept it too moist and was like mud. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. I would like to pick your brain. I'm going to, if you don't mind, give me just a second, peeps. I've just taken a screenshot of that comment because I will not be remembering. And if it's on my desktop, it's like having my little post-its ready to go. It was advertised similar to hard akadama. That is just wrong. Kept it too moist. Well, I would like to know, Michelle, right here, if you don't mind, did it have the similar visual of like the little clay? They're not rounded, they're uneven little shapes, sort of size, small. I'm not even going to say what size, because very, very tiny particles. Okay. That's naughty, because hard akadama would never turn to mud. No matter, because you can say you kept it too moist. No, you did what you did because you were given a product. You were made to believe the product could withstand the kind of water and the water retention for whatever you were going to use it for. You cannot keep akadama too moist. It's either wet or it's not. I mean, okay, you know, we can do the dry top layer, and then inside it'll still be moist in the pot regardless. You can't have like a dry akadama throughout the pot unless you've let it go dry for 3, 4, 5 weeks. I don't know. I've never let my akadama go dry. So you were sold something that didn't live up to what they were putting on the label. Because if you were to try akadama, like the proper akadama, then that would not happen. Okay, another screenshot. Thank you for bearing with me while I do this, but yeah, brain like a sieve. I need these. Now, I've heard also that cat litter will do. You can use cat litter as a substitute for akadama. I was very tempted to try the cat litter, obviously, because, you know, cheaper than a bag of akadama. But you need to get cat litter of a specific clay, and I'm not exactly sure if it's the same as that. I'm going to add it into the description of the video once it's been processed, just to make sure that this comment gets a mention in the description. Because if you don't want to buy akadama, there is a cat litter. It is au natural. Yes, it is still on, Lynn Bristol. Hey! It is still on after some headaches, wall banging headaches. But we're here. It's good to see you. So there's a specific clay of cat litter, untreated, no perfume, no. And I'm going to put that into the description. But I want to make sure that I see your name. I've taken 2 screenshots now, and I'm going to research that. Okay, Michelle? Not that it's going to bring your orchid back. But yeah, not good, not good. I hope you've got your feet in barefoot in the sand, Lynn. Cough, cough. Anyway, so if something would appear to be too wet, if you were, for example, hesitant to use akadama, if you want to try it in a humid climate, break it up, use it with grit, use it with stones, whatever it is that you want. But if I say stones, I'm talking small stones. That's why I prefer to use the term grit, little teeny tiny gravel pieces, because you don't want it to become crushed by the weight. Like I said, you pinch it in your fingers, it will disintegrate. So you can imagine the weight of a pebble on top of akadama, on top, the weight, it's just going to crush through. So you don't want that. You want to kind of mix whatever you're going to put in there at a 50-50 ratio, más o menos, and then mix that up. And it has to be the similar size of the akadama that you're using so that it won't actually make the akadama disintegrate, okay? But hey, that's some tough stuff. I boiled mine unintentionally. You're welcome, Michelle. Okay, so we've done all of that with the porosity. We've done the humidity, the aeration. Surprise, surprise. I know it is consistently wet all the time, most of the time, and yet there is still air circulation happening in the pot. It's fabulous. So I have used only one bag. That was that one bag in the last 2 years. I say it's expensive. I don't need to buy it again, but it has served its purpose very well. And suddenly you think, well, it didn't cost me an orchid. My orchid didn't go down the way Michelle's went down. So it worked out for me, and I can only recommend it. And if anybody has any questions with greater detail, I'll be very, very happy to elaborate more on the akadama topic, maybe in a separate quick video, standard video. Having said all that, not above 60% humidity, and only if seramis is not easily sourced in your area, then akadama is a fantastic alternative, which is a great seg into our next inorganic media, one that I've personally have a certain affection for. I know it's weird, but I do love my seramis. I do love it. It was nice to get some bags in after a while. Thank you to the donations, and I went on a little bit of a seramis media shopping spree, and funny enough, now it's hard to purchase, but I have enough because I'm not expanding my orchid collection, and what I'm using it for, if the orchids don't make it, I can recycle it. Lightweight, forgiving on the roots, long-lasting, recycle, easily flushed. Yeah, you see, I'm biased. Lynn says, I just had time to hear about charcoal. The charcoal in my neck of the woods is organic, using very hard wood and burned underground. No barbecue briquettes. No. Oh, you, not only do you live in paradise, your climate is orchid paradise, you even have the resources at hand that are perfect. What can I say? You must be like Fred Flintstone when he's driving or running and he's on tiptoes. Sharon-san, it's good to see you. Good morning, beautiful. I hope that you're feeling better. I hope you got some rest. I hope this, whatever you're dealing with, don't want to make it public unless you do. I hope that it didn't keep you up all night. And I hope you're healing nicely. So seramis, it's a clay granule. It's a fine grade of fired clay that's becoming more and more popular with growers everywhere. Yes, it is. Now it's hard to find. It holds an incredible amount of water, even beating that of soil or cocoa coir. And its granular structure still allows free drainage. Lots of aeration going on with seramis. I use it as a mix to add into, let's say, leca, if I want to. I use it as an added wicking media for lava rock, which we're going to get into a little bit later on. It has a natural pH of 5.226, which one needs to be aware of when it comes to pHing. I have not had any issues when it came to those pH levels, because normally I don't store my leca in water, my seramis, sorry. I don't store my seramis in water. I use it dry, and then whatever I'm either mixing it with or not mixing with, it makes it very easy to pH and get to 6.5, which I'm using for everybody else most of the time anyway, especially when I'm doing a soak. So I put that into the cons so that people are aware that it does have a natural pH of its own, and seeing as seramis is usually just flushed free of the dust, it is very dusty when it comes into the bags, flushed free of the dust, given it a boil to sterilize it, it will still have a natural pH of its own. So I put that into the con just for awareness. And I also put into the cons hard to source. It was very easy to find here in Europe. It's become more difficult to find, but it's always been a difficulty to find it in the United States. So I put that into as the cons. And that's why if you want akadama or pumice, then the two are options, especially if you want something that is a smaller granule, then you can definitely go with pumice. If you're not sure about akadama, especially if you're not sure about the quality you're getting, you can get pumice that is a little bit smaller and matches the size of seramis. They pretty much behave the same, except pumice stays wetter for longer, from what I've noticed, as opposed to seramis, because if I look at the tops of my pots that have pumice in them, and the tops of my pots that have seramis in them, and the orchids are similar, my seramis will dry out, whereas my pumice doesn't. Okay, Sharon, that's fine. That's fine. It was a mess. If I'm going to put timestamps in, I promise. At the beginning, it was a mess because I didn't even expect that anybody was going to come. So I was like, hyperventilating. It's a fun start to a live, I can tell you that much. It's really weird. I didn't even know that while I was live, that I was back on exactly the same stream, which was bizarre when I went live again, but that the older stream was on private. It was just odd. But anyway, take care, sweetie. Have a wonderful, wonderful evening. Day. You have a wonderful day. Thank you for stopping by. Okay. 9 a.m. in Western Australia. 2 a.m. in Southern Spain. Time check. Okay, right. So, Seramis, if there aren't any further questions, if not, the comments afterwards will be there as well, and we can continue the subject, because I've been talking about grit a lot. Grit this, grit that. Let's talk about grit, and let's get into grit in a little bit more detail. You pull that up. Lots of clicking of the mouse. Make sure I share that and get rid of this. There we go. Grit, not just to eat, not just for chickens, but also for orchids. It's good stuff. Okay, there's a lot of, there's a lot of uses for grit, especially if you can't source your right-sized pebbles and rocks and whatever to break up the dry top layer of a pot if you are growing in a dry climate or a dry environment. When I say climate and environment, please don't think I'm only referring to my conditions because I partially grow outside. I'm talking about indoor grow spaces as well, okay? Climate, environment. I use them interchangeably, but not exclusively for outdoor growing. Anyway, so especially if you can't find these river pebbles, and sometimes the pebbles are, in comparison, expensive. I know they're not expensive as such. You could also go to a river and collect them yourself. It makes for a nice day out and get yourself lots of nice sized river pebbles that you might find in your area. But if you can't, and then these decorative river pebbles come along, they're more pricey than a big bag of grit, which will last you forever. It is forgiving on the roots. It is easily flushed, and you can recycle it over and over and over again. Super cost effective. I find it more easily sourced than the pebbles. I have pebbles in my garden center, but they go from, yeah, I would say, from a bark chunk on up. I don't get the nice pretty little ones. Hey Linda, it's good to see you. It's good to see you. 7 p.m. in Nebraska. I hope you excuse me, I hope you're staying warm. It's good to see you. Thank you so much for joining in. Excuse me, the frog. So here we are, pH neutral and inert. Because it's not a porous media, it will not absorb whatever water you're washing it with, flushing it with, or whatever. Nothing. It won't change anything with regards to your pH concentration for your nutrient solution. It's fantastic. And lime-free for beginners is what I've put in here. And I'm going to read again from my notes because word salad has no calories, but it's hard to digest. So, lime-free or not lime-free versions are available, and that is why I've put that in the cons as, catch people's eyes. Depending on what orchids are going to be in the pots in which you add grit. Lime-free can be used in case you are not sure about the pH variables that grit with limestone would influence. Know that lime naturally increases the pH, and some orchids love it. While that is not the case across the board, so while limestone has a very high pH buffering effect, it will slowly neutralize the pH in the pot to around about 7, but not higher. If the grit includes dolomite lime, it will react much faster in raising the pH. In Europe, here, horticultural grit is lime-free, making it a pH-neutral product. Okay, so there are advantages to grit having lime in it because it's fabulous. Grit normally is composed of silica, limestone, quartzite, granite, a few others, lots of different bits and pieces of whatever is in grit. But in it is limestone for the majority of the time. But you can get lime-free grit as well. So if you're not entirely sure, but you do want to use grit because it has so many positive advantages with the aeration, mixing up media, even organic media. Okay, it's not just that this material is for inorganic growing. You can mix that up. You can put grit into a pot with just sphagnum moss. It'll do exactly the same thing as perlite without absorbing water or retaining salts. So if you're going to weigh the odds about breaking up and giving more aeration into your pot when you're just using sphagnum moss, for example, without having to worry about the algae being taken on board like perlite has, grit is perfect. Make sure then it is lime-free. The different pieces of whatever part that worries. Yes, I know. But when you see, here's the thing. I got my grit from the construction site, okay? I did ask for lime-free, but they have big tubs and, you just take a scoop and, it costs pennies. It doesn't cost anything. And they pretty much told me it's everything that is in there that is not poisonous, because if you're going to be building something, then you cannot be putting anything toxic into the concrete or the pavement or whatever. Are we covering? No, we have not, and we're not covering scoria because I don't know enough about it, but you are sure welcome to come up and talk about it if you want to, because I was addressing the subject of charcoal, stumbling over my words there because I have no experience, never used it. I'm just reading through the notes, trying to make sense of everything. And I just want to make sure that, I don't want to get ahead of myself there, but I'd be very, very happy to have a conversation about that, Sharon's son. But anyway, so I went to my construction guy, just as an exception, they wanted to dump a 250 kilogram bag in my yard. That was the minimum amount I could purchase. And I was like, no. Anyway, he said there's no toxins in there at all. And I told him what I needed it for. And he says, absolutely no problem whatsoever. And it wasn't like he said, you're doing what? he knew exactly what I was needing it for, because I'm telling him I'm using clean water, clean this, clean that, sterilize this, do that, boil, recycle. And he said, absolutely no problem. So horticultural grit, while a little bit more expensive, will definitely have everything listed on those packages. It has to. It's a must. So I wouldn't be surprised if you didn't have everything listed on a horticultural grit bag in Australia. I would be very, very surprised. But there was one thing. So just make sure the lime free for beginners, and some orchids, especially if you have like the rock dwellers, speciosum, cough cough, they grow on limestone. So if you're going to be doing something with an orchid that loves limestone and you've got grit with limestone, you're going to make that orchid very, very happy. Okay, right. I can't keep up with the videos. I'm seeing that you've posted another video. I can't keep up. I've had a horrendous, never mind. We're back up and running, so stop it. Stop it. Okay, why are you up? Okay, you're up. Let me remove this one, and we're going to move on to Leca. I'm not going to... Ileana, Valerio, it's good to see you. Thank you for being here. Hope you're doing well. We're moving on to Leca. Bienvenido to the live stream. So I know that I've been banging on a lot about Leca on my channel. I would like to make sure that people know that I use Leca and self-watering. Hello. Oh, Lynn, you're fine. You're fine. Oh, trust me. Trust me, if this concept with live streaming grows, I can assure you that I will be missing a lot of comments. So please, nobody ever take that personally. Anyway, yes, so I use a lot of Leca in my setups because now it is relatively inexpensive for me. It is easily sourced and it does exactly what I want it to do on most occasions, and some occasions it doesn't, and I haven't quite figured it out. But what I like about it, of course, is the fact that I can recycle it, reuse it. That makes it cost effective, even though in the cons I've put that it is expensive, because it is expensive. If you are planning to start a collection or take your entire collection in a different direction with different media, especially if you start with semi-hydroponics and you're saying, yeah, this is for me, and you go with Leca, it is an expensive undertaking. It is, consider it an investment. It will pay off in the long term. The last bag of Leca that I bought was early 2021. And I never looked back. I can tell you from personal experience that in 2020, when I lost my job, I had no issues about which orchids needed to be repotted and which didn't. I would have had a big problem if I was growing in bark. This is my personal experience. It was the first time I realized how grateful I was to the fact that I could recycle. And again, not because of environment and sustainability, it was just pure selfish gratitude that I could just go and repot 50 orchids in 2020. I didn't have to choose who needed it most because I was growing in Leca and I wasn't worried about the cost of shipping in bark. It made me so happy. But anyway, that's why I'm saying it is cost effective, even though I have listed as a con that it is expensive. Now, the con of Leca or any kind of transition, I would say most of all Leca, the transition workload is a little bit higher at the beginning, but long term, all of a sudden it's like you can go on vacation for 5 or 6 days and your orchids are going to be fine. Of course, there is a higher risk of rot. Even me, I've been growing in the stuff for so long, I've still haven't dialed a few orchids in, and I will be rescuing them and putting them in bark to give them a chance because it's not working out. I'm not getting it right. The dimensions, the ratio, I don't know. Maybe just because they're bifoliates. I don't know. I don't care. I'm going to pull back. I'm going to go and put them in bark and hope that I can save them. So there are risks with Leca, but I would say the risks are 20%, and the upsides are 80%, because if you, with any media, if you wait for new roots, it's going to be fine when you repot into the new media, and that includes leca, whether it stays wet consistently, or if you're going to transition into a wet dry cycle, which I'm going to do with 2 of my orchids. I'm waiting for new roots, and they're going to go into bark, because if I transplant them now, I'm not going to do them any favors at all by just switching their setup randomly. So it has nothing to do with the fact that you're moving an orchid into leca. I would really like to burst that stigma, because honestly, this media has helped me so much and made me feel so much better about the decision-making process that I'll never diss leca. Anyway, I don't know if not everybody knows, but LECA is an acronym. It stands for Lightweight Expanded Clay Aggregate. It sounds very complicated, but when you break it down, it is a good and descriptive name. Essentially, LECA is a growing media like bark in which you grow your plants. That's it. With the exception that it won't break down and you can use it indefinitely. Now, however, unlike LECA, just being a collection of little balls, marbles, it doesn't contain any nutrients. Bark will have some little residue nutrients of its own when the little bacteria get going and start to do the decomposition, producing and jumping up nitrogen, you name it. There's activity, there are nutrients being released by organic media. They do soak up a little water, they will expand when they soak up a little water, and they do a lot of wicking. And fertilizing is a must. Growing in leca, growing in inorganic, period, is very telling. And mistakes, in nutrients, provisions, pHing, it's not forgiving in the slightest. So any mistakes made along those lines, your orchids will show the signs, and it is a massive learning curve that at least we're talking mobile nutrients. The orchid is not going to die because of mistakes in pHing. We can correct those, but it does teach you a lot about the whole metabolism of an orchid. It's fantastic. Now, the reason I'm banging on about leca a little bit more than, let's say, you want to do a wet dry cycle in river rock, is because river rock doesn't wick. River rock, you throw the pH of the water in. It's a wet dry cycle growing method, just inorganic. With leca always being wet, pumice always being wet, no nutrients in the media whatsoever. Any kind of mistake or long-term, let's say, lack of nutrient absorption will show. I'm not saying that doesn't happen with organic media, but it's not forgiving in organic media. We are really held to task when it comes to pHing. So I'm learning a lot, and I'm starting 2023 in spring. I'm always recovering my summer bloomers with Epsom salt soak. The whole collection for the summer of 2023 is going to be pounded with Epsom salts. Less is more, but a lot more often, because I can see how during the winter the mobile nutrients are going from the back growths moving forward to the new growths, thankfully, but we can react. So that is my spiel on leca, and I'm hoping that if there are any questions, I didn't miss them. So I'm just going to check the chat here a little bit. Where did I leave off? Awesome requirement and all that. I'm sorry, I'm just going to spin Robbie. Conversations are being had in the chat. I love it. Oh, thank you, Sharon. I'm glad that you give me that feedback. I appreciate that a lot. Thank you. And you too, Andyland. Thank you. Me 3. Michelle. 3's company, they say. No, 2's company, 3's a crowd. No, the more the merrier. Bring it on. Lynn Bristol does not have leca on her island. You know something, Lynn? I think you're stop. You're in paradise. You don't need leca. Your climate does the growing. Yes, we had that discussion, Michelle. They love it. My palm trees Oh, my jungles in Germany, when I put them in leca and self-watering, it was just fantastic. Yes, we'll be doing Epsom salt soaks. We will not be following me into my bathtub. No, we're going to be doing them for the orchideos. I seriously need some Epsom salt soak myself after today. Goodness me, goodness me. Anyway, so that is me banging on about leca when I'm saying vulnerable. Cons, vulnerable. I have to qualify vulnerable. I know I put it in there for a reason, and I cannot for the life of me remember why. Again, this is a digital product prototype. I am going to revisit why I put vulnerable at this point in time. I can't. Oh, vulnerable to salt. Yes, vulnerable to debris loading, just like perlite. It is indeed, because it is porous. So it does retain salts, but it does flush easily. The only thing is you have to keep it consistently damp. Don't worry about the top dry layer. That's fine, because you can pick those off if you get salt accumulations there. Flush the pot through and put fresh leca on the top. Not a big deal. But it is vulnerable to mineral loading. Thank you, Lynn. Before I was flushed red just by hyperventilating with everything that was going on. Now I'm green with envy. I'm going through all the colors. Okay, so the vulnerable part is just like with perlite. It will absorb salts. Make sure that you keep your flushing regimen on point. Okay, blockage refers to the fact that the roots will start to find the nooks and crevices in between the sphere packing of the leca. So eventually any repot, like with any other orchid, it will be necessary, because we have to always keep aeration in mind. Gas exchange is paramount. And the good old roots that grow in abundance in leca and self-watering or semi-hydroponics will fill in all the little gaps. And that's what I mean by blockage. Righty-ho. Then we are going to go to, let me make sure that my notes match up with my card. Yes. We're going to go on to, I think, many people's favorite here. How about I open that window before I expose my screen again. There we go. Not that I have anything to hide, but it just looks a bit of a mess, you know? I like to have things tidy. There we go. Pebbles! And not the Flintstone kind. Not the Flintstone pebbles, although I loved her to bits. When I say pebbles, of course, I'm talking about river rock, but I would prefer to call it pebbles because unless you're growing river rock style, I consider a rock the size of a fist. Everything lower, you know, less than that is a pebble to me. So, however, river rock, gravel or pebble, whatever it is round, preferably, just because it looks pretty. It's smooth, it's natural, and it is shaped by erosion. And if not, if you want to crack it to size, don't worry about any sharp edges. People have always said, oh, everything with a sharp edge, boo, not good for the orchid roots. They don't care. They just grow over it, and they do the dent and the kink. An orchid root can go through a piece of cork bark, come out the other side. It's not going to give a hoot about a sharp edge. Except when it comes to repotting, we might want to be very, very careful because, you know, these kinks can snap. But when it comes to the health of how an orchid root grows, a sharp edge, oh, we're going to end the whole evening with lava rock. So talk about sharp edges there. So yeah. Anyway, there's no need to worry about sharp edges when it comes to orchid roots at all. You're welcome, Ileana. Great minds, huh? Gosh, I love that bloom. That is a wine delight, maybe? Yes, your hands do care. That is true. I use a scrubby brush. When it comes to sharp edges and lava rock, if I need to, I take a scrubby brush. If I can't do a cleaning and a sterilizing load in one day because the batch is too big, I spread it over several days because I don't want to get my fingers raw. Anyway, so If you cannot easily source rounded river rock while you are on your nature walk and you see small stones with sharp edges, then don't worry, because you can get a stash of those and they will work just fine. And if you're not 100% convinced, I'm going to point you in the direction of lava rock. Unless tumbled, lava rock has very sharp edges, and what a fabulous seg that turned out to be, because up next it's lava rock. But you can see how I put up there no cons, except for heavy. And that is because I do struggle with carpal tunnel. So I try to keep my pots as easily manageable as I can. I don't want something to happen with my wrists. Too many glasses and silverware were polished in my life, so I've got very weak wrists. Carpal tunnel is a thing. And you can see that most of the attributes, if not 99.9% of the attributes when it comes to pebbles, they're all pros. It's good stuff. Just watch about the weight. Lynn Bristol says, my last pebble acquisition was from the beach. Nah, 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 nah. Oh, that's awesome. Soak it, soak it, soak it. Just soak it a lot. Leach, leach, leach. Just leach that stuff a lot and put it in the rain that you have in abundance. Yeah, all right. Know that although we don't think it's very porous, pebbles do have a porous effect. Even though they might be shiny and smooth on the outside, just let them leach, not just wash, but leach and rinse that water out regularly. So my last media, and if I'm not mistaken, I would consider lava rock to be heavier than pebbles, depending, of course, how you use it, in what quantity you use it. It's all relative, of course. Okay, so don't quote me. My word is not gospel. But in the quantities that I use lava rock, seeing as I hardly use pebbles. Meanwhile, speaking of grit, I do have just the quartz from the playground that I use as well. Haven't used that as a top dressing just yet. Seems to be working out how things are now sort of finding their groove even during the drier months of the year. But yeah, seeing as I don't use pebbles at all, I consider, in my experience, lava rock heavier. That's why it is last on the list. I say it's heavy as a pro and heavy as a con. As I mentioned earlier, certain issues when it comes to age, or maybe not, depending on your profession. It could be a con to have a heavy pot, but it is a pro because it stabilizes the pot, it stabilizes the orchid, and even if it gets a bit breezy, it's not going to topple over and there won't be that many abrasions. Sharon Carpenter says, suggest if you are ever concerned about the rocks, pebbles you collect, boil the ever-living, yes, same thing, boil, sterilize, absolutely. Anything inorganic, boil to sterilize it before using. Excuse the frog. So I put wicking into the pros as well, but lava rock in itself isn't a wicking agent. It doesn't have the characteristics. However, because of the textures, so many pores, so many nooks and crannies, the water retention has a natural rising, effect. If water is filled there, it's going to find a way through everything. So it does have a kind of wicking effect, even though in itself it doesn't wick. It is super long lasting. Yes, we can do that. Absolutely. If you would just give me a moment and let me finish yapping away about the lava rock, then absolutely come on up. We can do the Oprah Winfrey thing. Come on up. So it is inert and it is pH neutral, meaning that you don't have to worry about pHing, which is amazing. Lots of aeration. It is easily sourced. And obviously, as I mentioned, pot stability. It will retain some salts, but it is so easily to flush out. And, you don't mistake whatever white you see on the surface of your pot for salts. If it comes off easily, little dusty, that is salts. If it doesn't, it means that your lava rock on the surface is fading, okay? Right, so I do have a little bit of a thing of notes here for lava rock, because I find it interesting that the first 3 minerals listed that are found in red lava rock are nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. They must sound familiar to everybody, and if they don't, these 3 components represent the 3 numbers you find on any fertilizer containers, NPK. Other minerals that are available and readily available in lava rock are zinc, iron, copper, magnesium, boron, sulfate, calcium, manganese, and sodium. You would think that this stuff is a portable fertilizer, okay? So the thing is, the above minerals are not in a form that can be absorbed by the orchid for a considerable amount of time. So don't worry if you see all that. If you read up on it, don't worry. They won't clash with your choice of fertilizer or the pH at which you are fertilizing. Okay, and this is why I put this in my notes, because I understand it in my head. I'm not entirely sure if I can repeat it without going, dyslexic. So, while an orchid's root system releases organic acids such as citric acid and oxalic acid, these pH levels will eventually turn the solid minerals into a form that can be absorbed and used by the plant, which would lead us to believe that the minerals contained in red lava rock would give our orchids a jump start in the growing patterns. While there is an element of truth to that, given the amounts of fertilizer that we use for our orchids, there is no danger of over-fertilizing. However, it is possible that the fact that our fertilizer solutions are more on the acidic side of the spectrum, lava rock can accumulate salts at the surface of the pot, even if we do not fertilize, because of their own fertilization, whatever they have in themselves. So there's nothing going wrong with your pot. It doesn't mean you haven't leached them out properly. It doesn't mean you haven't boiled them enough. Nothing going wrong if you're not fertilizing your orchids and you're seeing salt buildup. That is the natural, let's say, the minerals in the lava rock coming to the surface over time. It doesn't happen quickly. Anyway, we are fertilizing our orchids because the stuff is inert. You need to give your orchids something. So either way, your fertilizer levels can be okay. You may still get salt buildup, and that's why I mentioned if you just scrape the surface, if you see something white, if you just scrape the surface, I see you, Sharon. If you just scrape the surface, then if it comes off in a very fine, powdery, dusty form, that is salt buildup. Remove the surface lacquer, the lava rock, forgive me, remove the surface lava rock that has any of these salt buildup, replace with fresh. Don't worry about what's going on in the pot. Everything is okay as long as your orchid is looking amazing at the surface. Don't worry about what's going on in the pot. Now, so while I say it is fundamental that the cleaning process of the rock fresh out of the bag is absolutely necessary, even though it won't take out any of the minerals, lava rock is super dusty. Just like with seramis, just like with perlite, all of that stuff, you don't want that in the pot. So just taking it from the strainer under and flushing out the dust is not going to do the trick. Even to this day, I have not bought a bag of lava rock for the last 4 years, and I'm reusing my lava rock, and every time it dries out and every time that I sort it out, I see more dust in my catch tray. Because it is so porous, because it is so fine, bit by bit, it starts to break off. And, we can say brittle, even though that doesn't make sense. But boil it, and you will see your water kind of turn muddy. There is so much gunk coming out of it. And even after you've got it as clean as you think you've got it, your pot at the base may still always show signs of accumulation. That is something that akadama will not do, but lava rock will. It doesn't mean you've done something wrong. It's in the nature of this material to respond like that, okay? I've got pots of lava rock that I unpotted, and it was like I had some kind of a slurry at the bottom, which was all fine lava rock dust, even though I do sometimes take a brush to my lava rock and scrub it. I know. Never mind. Moving on. So, as with any other inorganic media, the cleaner it is, the better the climate of the pot will be over an extended period of time. But don't beat yourself up when you do repot, when you've got an orchid in lava rock and you're like going, oh yikes, I have to do a better job. Just know that if the water runs clean, and if you've rinsed it clean, you've boiled it, that's the maximum amount you can do with it. And all the minerals we were just talking about, they are there over time. They will not clash with your fertilizer. And if you don't fertilize at all, don't worry, you will get some mineral and salt buildup at the surface. So, my last thought on lava rock is, because it is an igneous molten rock thing as well, let me just see how I've described this. Okay, technically, it isn't really lava. I know, I'm now being a bit silly, but at the end of the presentation, let's lighten the mood. Lava is what we call the molten rock that flows from an active volcano after it's exposed to the air. Underground, it is called magma. So what we call lava rock is an igneous rock, meaning it's hardened lava. I know, what do you want to say? Splitting hairs here. The lava rock we use for orchids, while also an igneous rock, is known as basalt, which is composed of various minerals and chemicals as discussed. Now, with all this volcano stuff that we have such fun with when it comes to growing our orchids, imagine what is in our pots in form of lava rock. And that could be from a volcanic eruption from like 30,000 years ago. I know, I'm sorry. I bet you'll never look at your lava rock the same way again. Imagine the stories it could tell. I look at my lava rock and I wonder, where have you been? What kind of a life have you had? So one of the cons of lava rock, as much as I like it, and every time I talk about saving my orchids in bark, I'm like, hold up. I may not even need to purchase bark. I can save my orchids in lava rock. Because even if I don't do it in semi-hydroponics, which I don't intend to do, I intend to use lava rock in a wet-dry cycle. It is perfect in a dry climate. It retains the water over a longer period of time in a normal pot with all the holes and aerations on the outside. And I can cultivate any orchid in lava rock in a wet-dry cycle. The one thing that has turned me off of lava rock, that's why I was switching orchids that were so happy in it into leca, was how unforgiving it is on the roots when it comes time to repot. And that is why I was like, yeah, no. And that was at the time when I was potting my orchids according to the size of the orchid, and I wasn't thinking like I'm doing now, long term, I'm just going to throw it in a bigger pot and let it go. Bearing in mind that nothing's going wrong with the orchid, of course, and that's not our intention. So the transition workload I mentioned as a con is if you're going to do it in a semi-hydroponic setup, as with anything, unforgiving on the roots when it comes to repotting, because you cannot easily pick off a root that has grown on lava rock without absolutely destroying it. So there is that. But yes, that is me. I'm done. I'm not done, as in I'm buzzing because we're live, considering everything, and that you guys are here. Thank you once again so much. Andy Land, you won't regret it. Absolutely won't regret it. And I am going to keep reminding myself. In the last lives, I've actually thought about it, and I keep telling myself, I'm going to switch to bark. I may not have enough lava rock on hand. Anyway, I don't know, but you can save an orchid in lava rock if you don't want to be using bark. So I'm going to have to think about that. I still have time. The orchids I'm talking about are not growing roots just yet. Anyway, Sharon, Orchid Ninja, Sharon's son. Hello. Hello.
Hello, how is everyone? Can you hear me
Well,
okay?
yeah, I can hear you absolutely fine. Sound check for the masses. The masses that are here. I know. Can everybody hear Sharon okay? Is my background music too loud? Or is it a pleasant little, I don't know, it seems like, woohoo! There she is. There she is. Or Sharon from Australia.
All right, so I thought I'd jump on just to talk a little bit about scoria.
That's awesome.
And this could be really, really, really short, guys. Okay, so there's someone saying they can't hear me. So throw a one in the chat if you can hear me.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, now you can. Maybe it's just about me dragging my microphone a little closer to me. It's a
Turn
big
your
microphone.
hearing aid up. Not yours. Andy Land, turn your hearing aid up.
Beautiful. All right, because I thought that, you know, I work with a bit of scoria, and I know this could be very short. And the reason I say that this could be really, really short is, as I was saying to Nina and I were emailing back and forth, and I'm just wondering, you know, how different products and different things are called different things in different areas of the world. I mean, leca is generally known as leca everywhere, but, you know, you get different terminology for different things all the time. This little piece of nugget right there, does that not look like lava rock to everyone?
Yes, it does.
Yeah, this is what we call scoria.
Could have fooled me.
So this is what we call scoria in Australia. It's sold in landscaping shops. I can get a bag of this, and I can actually get it by the cubic meter for about $30. That's the cubic meter.
That's awesome.
I don't get it by the cubic meter because I don't have, you know, cubic meter areas to be able to store it. But I get it in bags, and even the bags that are probably around this easily, you know, that wide, and, you know, like 3 times the size of me in width, and they go up to my waist. They cost about $6.
Wow.
So I have 2 types of this rock, and to me it looks like lava rock. And I've said, you know, to Nina, you know, I suspect that this may very well be lava rock. I've got 2 sizes, so I spent a grand total of $12 to get a ridiculous supply of scoria, but that was the smallest amount that they sell it in my landscape. This stuff just sits in big bays where you actually go and shovel it into your bag.
Yes.
So, you know, and it's used in building. You know, when we're building my house in Safety Beach, we actually have all this rock just sort of sitting there. They used it, and I can just pick it up from the ground. I mean, I'm not going to spend lots of time doing that, but, you know, it's certainly there throughout the thing. So I've got, oh my God, I just knocked something. So I've got a couple of different sizes. So I've got this really tiny pebbly. Is that going to focus my camera? Seriously, dude, seriously. Come on. Don't focus on me. Focus on the rock. So that's that.
Yeah, it looks like my medium-sized lava rock.
Yep, looks like lava rock, right? I'd be surprised if it wasn't. And I think that maybe it's just sold under different names, which kind of proves my point. So I've got that one, and I've got this one, which again I showed before. But, you know, as Nina said, you'll see all those porous holes. Look at those holes.
It's fantastic. Oh, is it lightweight? Do you think it's lighter than lava rock or a similar weight?
I've never had lava rock. To me, this looks like lava rock. I would have thought this was lava rock, but it's sold here as scoria. So to me, it's a volcanic rock, clearly. It is, I would call it heavy. I would not call it light. It's not like leca. Leca is light as, like it's very, very, very light.
Right.
Leca, so this is quite heavy. Now, I have a couple. So for those of you who watched my Sarcochilis tour on my channel that I posted several days ago. Now, I showed a couple of the Sarcochilis orchids that I have that are in the scoria. And I would say that this is quite heavy. I have just done this repot, and I mentioned in the Sarcochilis tour that I was going to have to do a repot of a couple of my seedling orchids. Well, I have filmed that. This is the end result. That video will go up sometime during the week once I'm done editing. But I would not say that this is lightweight in any way, shape or form. Nina, what you said about having to wash it and wash it and wash it and wash it and wash it, absolutely true. And even then, wait till you see the video that I post this week. If you do, you'll see a muddy, I just finished preparing it before I filmed the video. You will see a sludge at the very, very bottom of my bowl. So there's nothing you can do about that. I will put up a little short this week also on how I prepare that scoria. Well, again, lava rock or scoria, take your pick, guys. See, to me, this looks like lava rock. And when I saw Nina's videos on lava rock, it just looked to me like Nina looked to me like she was using what I know to be scoria. So, and my partner, Mark, once upon a time, he had a little horticulture business, and he used to grow carnation flowers. He used to grow them in this media. So, and he used to gather them up and sell them on consignment to different shops, which then sold them on. So it's a great little media for even the most delicate of flowers, because I would not call things like carnation flowers with their very fine roots the most, they're very, very delicate. So, but it's a fabulous media. I love this stuff. I mix it into everything. All of my aroids, anything that's epiphytic, I will always mix a little bit of this in, particularly with anything that's a lithiophyte. But yeah, I can't really add more to what Nina already said about lava rock, because everything she said about lava rock applies to this.
Same thing.
Yeah.
Here we go.
I think we should put up a poll. Those who think lava rock in Spain and scoria in Australia are the same. I reckon we're there. I was curious to know, though. I was just wondering when I used to talk to Nina about whether lava rock or scoria were the same thing. It'd be interesting to figure that out, but I'm pretty sure we've just confirmed it. I love you, scoria, and I don't even know you yet. That's a fantastic comment.
So I just found a website, and I'm just going to share what I've got here. I've put the link in the description, but it doesn't look the same, because I just typed in USA for sale scoria landscaping, so that we could at least, if you say scoria,
and that's in the US. That's right.
Yeah, it might come up differently, but at least this could now, if you accept the cookies, Andy Land and anybody else that's interesting, if you click on this website, you accept the cookies, maybe, your Google will learn that you're looking for scoria and start bringing in more suggestions. It looks a lot different.
It does, doesn't it?
The scoria you're using is the natural kind. This is the baked kind. And I guess it looks a lot more like gravel then as well. But they do say scoria, so...
Yeah, they do. I mean, it is a crushed volcanic rock. There's nothing incorrect about that. This is a crushed volcanic rock. This has not been smoothed out. This is really raw. It's very, it's very sharp. It's very, jagged. But yeah, I mean, it's fantastic for roots, as Nina said. So it just proves, guys, different things can be different things in different places of the world.
Yeah,
which of course it's very hard to keep up.
the thing is here, if you check the web page, you've got the first one that says it's from the USA, because you can see what I typed in my search, right? And then everything is Australia, 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 Australia. Everything. Well, we've got New Zealand here. But hey, look at this, landscaping rocks, but it doesn't say Lowe's. It doesn't say scoria. It tells me access denied because I'm in the EU. You're very welcome, Andy.
Yeah, so I mean, what I've got now is what we call a red scoria, but yeah, it's available everywhere and it's, if you go to a landscaping site, it's so cheap. Most of the growers who sell orchids will mix this in with everything.
Right.
It's just a lot cheaper than straight bark. Bark, as we know, is quite expensive, and good bark is quite expensive.
And it's not even that good anymore. Julie Sun was actually mentioning that she always also, I noticed from her videos, when she used to buy bark, kind of she was fed up because it was always damp when it came,
It depends on where you get it from.
Yeah, but you also get the condensation coming, the bags can rip, so air comes in, they're stacked on top of each other, the aeration holes don't do their function, I don't know.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I mean, it would definitely consider where you're getting it from. I get mine from a supplier, a wholesale supplier in Queensland. It comes in very, very, very large bags because I go through a fair bit of it. It's perfect orchiata bark. So I couldn't ask for anything. Like, it's fantastic quality. I would not go to our local big box. We don't call them big box stores, but we call them hardware stores here. I would not go there. I mean, a lot of people do, and a lot of people have success with it, but it's just typically mixed in, like the orchid mix, even the which is designed really for terrestrial, according to the labels, and then the coarse orchid mix. It's just mixed in with peat and a whole bunch of other stuff, and it comes wet. So I don't use it. I don't buy it. I used to, and I had nothing but problems with my plants in using it. So, but other people use it and they don't seem to have any issues. I know that Matthew over at Hello Plant Lovers channel with his orchids actually uses it with quite success. So.
Yeah. Well, my Andy Land just mentioned, no, I would never put styrofoam into any of my media mixes. That stuff is horrible, not only for the environment. If you get the degrading stuff, from the potato starch, that's pointless anyway in your pot. By the time the water touches it, it turns into slime. But no, when they do that, when they put styrofoam into a media mix for orchids, they're cheating you out of the perlite that they should use. And that is yuck. That is just yuck.
I will not use styrofoam because it's horrendous for the environment.
Well, exactly.
Julie got back from a local orchid nursery, not the Bunnings. So that's okay. Yeah, and I don't know what to tell you, Miss Julie. But I know that there are better suppliers out there. I'll happily talk to you off camera about that if you want a supplier. And price is comparable.
Okay. The thing is that I know that a lot of people use styrofoam to make the pot shallower. If they have a shallow rooted orchid that they, like a bulbophyllum, but you can't get, a shallow bowl or whatever it is, and you just have a standard pot. I know that Wade's Orchids used to always put, his packing peanuts and styrofoam at the base of the pot. But Michael, use reptile bedding bark, 80% dry. Yeah.
I know a few people that go to
you, Michael. Thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it. But I don't know if you
go to my reptile pet shop and they don't really have the same sort of stuff. I don't know. And if they do, it's priced at a premium. So it's not something that I'll go buy from using that particular method. But I do know that method is open to anyone who owns a reptile. And go to the reptile supply shop. They typically have very, very good bark and, wooden based media.
Yeah.
Comes already stripped down and things like that. And it's very safe because they've already made it safe for the animals.
Exactly. It's already sterile because they have to, right? I would assume, right? If you get something it has to be sterile if you're going to take it. And
Yeah, although I mean, this is a little bit off topic, but I worry sometimes. I have a number of aquariums, and I don't have them up at the moment for various reasons. But when I had them up, hugely into my aquariums, and every time I would have an issue, I would go to the pet shop and the supply shop, and I'd talk to them about the problem, and they would sell me some additive or some garbage. And I found out that one, the people who work there, they're young, they're students, they're probably in high school, they don't know. They're there to sell you product.
yeah,
And if the product make you lose thy fish, then you come back to buy more fish. And it
yeah,
wasn't until I started talking, kind of putting my problems, taking my problems elsewhere to the forums of the people who I saw their pictures. They had beautiful, beautiful tanks and very healthy tanks. I think these are the people I really need to be talking to. But that was only after 2 years of absolute hell and pain to
yeah.
figure out what I was doing was completely the wrong thing to do. And I made so many newbie mistakes with my planted tanks. I spent a ridiculous amount of money. So I'm a little bit suspicious on what supply shops can tell you. One, I don't think everyone's out there to just rip you off, but I do think that there's an element in hiring inexperienced staff. That's the first thing. And two, really, some of them are just terrible in that they don't care. They don't care whether the thing that they sells you go in with a problem. They don't care whether the thing that they sells you causes, a bad result, because you'll come back again.
Right,
Well,
right.
eventually you won't come back again. So, hopefully,
Well, Andy Land put in a
advice,
comment that he's using
find
square.
find the people who know it, like find the people with the pictures that prove that they know what they're doing,
Yeah,
not
yeah.
the people at the pet shops and the and all of that sort of stuff is my
Well,
advice
it's
on
like
stuff. So
it's like the
sorry, I
other
went on
night.
a rant. I went on a tangent. My apologies.
That's fine. It's like we did the other night when we were talking about, leca that floats, and you don't know until you get home and do all the thing, and then 2 weeks later it's still floating, and that's always such a bummer because
Bad liquor.
you can't test it, and yeah, it's a pity. But then Andy Land just mentioned he puts square inch blocks of foam in the bottom, but the roots still get stuck. Of course, the roots will get stuck into anything and everything, and foam.
Epiphytic roots will stick to everything that they possibly can.
Yeah, and foam is also much more easier to get through. If they can get through baked bark, let's say cork bark, like my aphyllum, the roots are coming out through the center of the pot. They found a way. They might find it's like a little cave land for them inside the bark, and they'll go through all of that. So yeah, I would stay away from the foam if you're going to. You see, the thing is that it's also lightweight, and if you want to crock a pot, I would go with something heavy that stabilizes the pot and the orchid as well. It doesn't fall over. Some people use
about that stuff. It can make the pots very top heavy. If you put light things at the bottom and you have heavy things at the top, that they just create instability. If you don't have any other option, guys, I don't want to throw shade at styrofoam, because if you're in a place of the world where you don't have lots of options to go get all these different types of media, then use what you got. You're going to have beautiful
exactly
plants.
and that's the thing, when most of the stuff that I've mentioned in the other live and this live, there's always a way to work around how to use what you have in your what you can get locally, and then figure out how to make that work for you and your orchids. Like when I couldn't get seramis anymore, I looked at akadama and then tried to work out how to make that balance work, with akadama being much more water retentive than seramis would ever be, So there's always those options, but we know.
Whatever you've got. You can put a plant, especially epiphytic plants, you can put them on almost anything and they'll grow as long as they have nutrients. I mean, they don't need, they need something to grow on, but really, when you think about it, what do they really need? They need air, or oxygen, sunlight, or light,
Right.
and they're the two most important things, and water
Water
and
nutrients.
I don't see media in that. I don't see media in there.
Yeah, yeah, no, exactly. And if you have nothing else to go with, then you just get a glass with some water and do semi-water culture as well. And Bob's your uncle, you're good to go.
Yeah.
Your root decided to anchor on a wall. Exactly. And that happens to me during the summer. And I keep telling myself when I'm about to move that orchid, don't forget. And then I move it and I hear click. I'm like, oh, okay. I just busted it. It is fun to watch them be able to do their thing. It really, really is. My phyllum cakeys that aren't developing on the big mount that I made, their roots have gone up the metal grating, the wrought iron grating. I can't move that mount anymore because the roots have just said, okay, what? So they'll even take metal as a home. They don't care. So Lynn
Oh, I see
Bristol,
surface. I shall crawl up it.
I know, exactly. So Lynn Bristol says my medium of choice is only coconut husk coir, pebbles, charcoal, probably sphagnum, the latter when it is available. Lots of sunshine, lots of humidity and airflow. Don't forget those, Lynn.
All right, so love to all. I do have to disappear. I just wanted to quickly come on and talk about scoria and
That's
all lava rock.
fantastic. I appreciate your input. And if nobody else has any more questions, then pretty much we can wrap it up at this point in time. And I want to once again say thank you so much for hanging in there with me with all of this that has happened in the
I'm
last.
gonna go watch the replay. I'm gonna watch the replay this afternoon when I'm pottering about the house. But
Yeah.
Have a wonderful day, everybody, or evening, or morning, or wherever you are in the world. And good to see you guys again.
Thank you for your information. Thank you, Sharon. Have a wonderful rest of your day, hey? And you heal nicely, okay?
Shall do.
Okay, bye. Just to clarify, I would never put styrofoam in my pots. Okay, gotcha. When I buy orchids, sometimes they arrive. Oh, they still do. Yes, okay. But yes, yes, exactly. And Wade's Orchids has done that a lot. And he also used to do that with catasetinae. And I would be like, okay, maybe because he's got so many plants, they all stand up all very nicely. I don't know. They all support each other. But yeah, I didn't think that they were still using styrofoam. But okay. Alrighty, everybody. Your support is appreciated. Thank you so much. Thank you, Julie-san, as well, for coming on yesterday. Robbie, for being around while I was doing stuff that I was doing. Massive support. I appreciate all of you so much. Your patience is, what can I say? Second to none. Have yourselves a wonderful rest of whatever time of day it is for you. And I hope that next week we are going to have some guests and no more matata. Take care. Stay safe. I'll see you on the tubes. Bye for now.